Hey, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight here on The Magical Solution, my YouTube channel, my Facebook group, The Magical Solution. This is how we grow. What's up, you guys? And of course, TikTok. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. For those of you who are on my Facebook group page, make sure that if you leave a comment, you also drop your screen name or your name because it doesn't show up in the comment section. All right. For everybody else, just leave a comment as you go. So as you know, tonight we're going to continue with our book, The Spirit's Book by Allan Kardec. So the last time we hung out together, we started chapters 12 through 15, but your girl got tired halfway through. So this is part 2 to chapters 12 to 15. Hey, what's up, Marius? And what's up, Jenny? How you guys doing tonight? So let's pick up where we left off. We are going to talk about the relationships beyond the grave. All right. So question 274. Do the different order of spirits establish a hierarchy of powers? And is there subordination and authority among them? Very much so. Spirits have authority over one another relative to their degree of evolution and exert it through an irresistible moral ascendancy. Can low order spirits evade the authority of those who are more evolved? I said irresistible. Question 275. It's so funny because when the spirits answer these questions, right, they answer them sometimes kind of sassy. You know what I mean? Like you can almost tell like the spirits are kind of fed up with his questions and they get like kind of rude, but I love it. You know what I mean? Because that's totally what I would be if I was a spirit. I would be such a sassy spirit. Anyway, 275. Do the power and influence that individuals enjoy on earth warrant them any supremacy in the spiritual world? No. Because the lowly will be exalted and the great will be abased. Read Psalms. Ooh. How should we understand this exalting and abasing? Don't you already know that the spirits are of different orders according to their merits? Well, then, the greatest on earth may be in the last class among the spirits, while their servants may be in the first. Don't you understand this? Didn't Jesus say, whoever humbles himself shall be exalted, and whoever exalts himself shall be humbled? 276. Don't those who were great on earth but find themselves abased among the spirits feel humiliated? Frequently. They feel great humility, especially if they have been proud and jealous. 277. After a battle, does a soldier who meets his general in the spirit world still acknowledge him as his superior? The title is nothing. True superiority is everything. 278. Are the spirits of different orders mixed together? Yes and no. That is, they may see each other, but they are distinguished from each other. They avoid or approach one another according to the similarity or dissimilarity of their sentiments, as is also the case amongst you. It is an entire world in and of itself, and yours is only a dim reflection of it. Those of the same order are drawn together by a sort of affinity, and they form groups or families of spirits united by sympathy and purpose. The good ones by their desire to do good, and the bad ones by their desire to do evil, by shame for their wrongdoings, and by the need to find themselves among others like them. This is exactly like a large city, where individuals of all social classes and conditions see and meet one another without mixing together, where societies are formed by similarities in tastes, and where vice and virtue jostle each other without speaking. 279. Do all spirits have mutual access to one another? The good ones go everywhere. It must be this way in order to bring their influence to bear upon the bad ones. Nevertheless, the realms inhabited by the good ones are forbidden to the imperfect ones, so that the later cannot bring their passions there. 280. What is the nature of the relationship between good and bad spirits? The good ones seek to combat the bad tendencies of the others in order to help them evolve. It is a mission. 281. Why do certain low order spirits take pleasure in inducing us to commit wrongs? They do so out of spite, for not having deserved to be among the good ones. Their desire is to prevent inexperienced spirits as much as possible from attaining the supreme good. They want to make others experience what they themselves are experiencing. Don't you see this is the same amongst yourselves? 282. Do spirits communicate with one another? They see and comprehend another. Speech is material. It is a reflection of the spirit. The universal fluid establishes a constant communication amongst them. It is the vehicle for the transmission of thought, as the air is for you the vehicle for sound. It is a sort of universal telegraph line that connects all worlds, enabling spirits to communicate from one another. 283. Can spirits disguise their thoughts and hide themselves from each other? No. Everything is out in the open for them, especially when they are perfect. They may be apart, but they always see each other. This is not an absolute rule. However, since certain spirits can very easily make themselves invisible to others if they deem it useful. 284. Since spirits no longer have a body, how can they establish their own individuality and make themselves recognizable to others around them? They establish their individuality by means of their perispirit, which makes them distinct from one another, as do the bodies among humans. 285. Do spirits recognize each other after having lived here on Earth? Like, does the son recognize the father and the friend recognize the friend? Yes. And thus from generation to generation. How do these who know each other on Earth recognize each other in the spirit world? We see our past life and read it there as if it were a book. As we watch the friends and enemies of our past, we also witness their passage from life to death. 286. Upon leaving its mortal remains behind, does the soul immediately see the relatives and friends who have proceeded into the spirit world? Not always. As we have said before, it requires some time to recognize its situation and shake off the material veil. 287. How is the soul received upon its return to the spirit world? The soul of the just as a beloved and long awaited brother or sister, and the soul of the wicked as a despised being. 288. What sentiment do impure spirits experience at the sight of another bad spirit who has just arrived? Bad spirits are pleased at seeing beings who resemble them and who are deprived, like they are, of infinite happiness. And just like on earth, it is a rascal among equals. 289. Do our relatives and friends sometimes come to meet us when we leave here on earth? Yes. They come to meet the soul they love. If it has escaped the dangers of the road, they congratulate it as though it were returning from a journey, and they help it to break free of its corporal bonds. It is a blessing granted to good spirits when those who love them come to meet them. And on the other hand, those who are blemished remain in isolation or are surrounded only by spirits like themselves. It is a punishment. 290. Are relatives and friends always reunited after death? That depends on how evolved they are and the path they are following for their advancement. If one of them is more advanced and progressed more quickly than the other, they cannot remain together. They may see each other occasionally, but they will not be reunited until they can walk side by side or when they have reached equality of purification. Moreover, being kept from seeing relatives and friends is sometimes a punishment. All right, now we're on the subject of sympathies and antipathies among spirits. Eternal halves. 291. Besides a general sympathy that results from various similarities, are there special affections among spirits? Yes. Just as among humans, however, the link that unites spirits is stronger in the absence of the body because they are no longer exposed to the vicissitudes of the passions. 292. Is there hatred among spirits? There is no hatred except among impure spirits, and these are the ones who sow enmity and dissensions among you. 293. Will two beings who were enemies on earth retain their resentment in the spirit world? No. They will understand that their hatred was senseless and its motive childish. Only imperfect spirits retain a sort of animosity until they are purified. If it was nothing more than material interest that had separated them, they will no longer think about it, no matter how little dematerialized they are. If there is antipathy between them, and if the cause of their dissension no longer exists, they can meet each other again with pleasure. Exactly like two schoolboys who have reached the age of reason realize that the childness of their infantile quarrels are no longer hold a grudge. 294. Is the remembrance of the wrongs that two individuals have committed against each other an obstacle to their sympathy? Yes. It makes them keep their distance from each other. 295. What sentiments do those whom have wronged in this world experience after death? If they are good, they forgive you according to your repentance. If they are bad, they may hold on to their resentment and at times even pursue you in another existence. God can allow this as a chastisement. Ooh. 296. Are spirits' personal affections susceptible to change? No, because they cannot be mistaken about each other. They no longer wear the mask behind which hypocrites hide themselves, and that is why their affections are unchangeable. When they are pure spirits, the love that unites them is a source of supreme bliss. 297. Does the affection that two beings had for each other on earth always continue in the spirit world? Yes, of course. It is based on true sympathy. However, if physical attraction has had more influence than sympathy, it will cease with the cause. Affections among spirits are more solid and lasting than on earth because they are not subject to the winds of material interests and self centeredness. 298. Are souls who must get together predestined for such a union from their origin, or does each one of us have in some part of the universe our other half, whom we will someday inevitably join? So here we go with the twin flames and the spirit twins and all that stuff. And here's the answer. No. No. There is no particular and predestined union between two souls. Unity exists among all spirits, but in different degrees according to the order they occupy, according to their degree of purification. The greater their purification, the more united they are. All the ills of humankind are born from discord, and concord gives rise to the complete happiness. 299. In what sense should we understand the term other half, which certain spirits use to designate sympathetic spirits? The, the expression is imprecise. If one spirit were another spirit's other half, it would be incomplete when separated from the other. 300. When two perfectly sympathetic spirits are united, will they remain so throughout eternity, or can they separate and unite with other spirits? All spirits are mutually united. I am referring to those who have already reached perfection. In less evolved spheres, after a spirit has improved itself, it no longer has the same sympathy for those whom it has left behind. 301. Are two sympathetic spirits each other's complement, or is such sympathy the result of perfect affinity? The sympathy that attracts one spirit to another is the result of the perfect harmony of their tendencies and instincts. If one of them were necessary to complete the other, it would lose its individuality. 302. Does the affinity needed for perfect sympathy consist only in a similarity of thoughts and sentiments, or does it also consist in a uniformity of acquired knowledge? It consists in the equality of their evolution. 303. Could spirits who are not sympathetic today become sympathetic later? Yes. All will be someday. Thus, when a spirit who today inhabits a certain less evolved sphere is perfected, it will reach the sphere where the other dwells. Their reunion will occur more quickly, however, if the more evolved spirit has remained at a standstill because it has poorly borne the trials to which it submitted itself. May two sympathetic spirits cease to be sympathetic? Certainly, if one of them is idle. The theory of eternal halves is an image that represents the union of two sympathetic spirits. It is an expression used even in ordinary parlance and must not be taken literally. Spirits who have used it certainly do not belong to the highest order. The sphere of their ideas is necessarily limited, and they express their thought through the terms they use in corporal life. We must reject this idea of two spirits created for each other, who must someday inevitably be united in eternity after having remained separated for more or less the span of time. We're now on the subject of the remembrance of corporal existence. Question 304. Does the spirit remember its corporal existence? Yes. Having lived many lives, having lived many times as a human being, it remembers what it has been, and I assure you that sometimes it laughs, pitying its behavior. Like an individual who, have reached the age of reason, laughs at the antics of youth or puerilities of childhood. 305. Does the memory of its last corporal existence completely and unexpectedly return to the spirit after death? No. It returns little by little, like something that appears out of a fog, and to the degree that the spirit fixes its attention to it. 306. Does the spirit remember all the events of its life in detail, assimilating the whole in one retrospective glance? It remembers things according to the consequences they hold for its situation as a spirit. But you should not understand that there are circumstances, but you should understand that there are circumstances to which it attributes no importance whatsoever and which it does not even try to remember. Could it remember them if it wanted to? It can recall the minutest details and incidences, events, or even thoughts, but when such has no usefulness, it does not do so. Does it see the purpose of earthly life in relation to its future life? Assuredly, it sees and understands it much better than when it lived in the body. It understands the need for purification in order to reach the infinite, and it knows that during each existence it frees itself from a few impurities. 307. How does its past life unfold in its memory? By an effort of the imagination, or like a picture it holds before its eyes? Both ways. All the actions that it has an interest in remembering are as if they were present. The others remain more or less at the back of its memory or entirely forgotten. The more dematerialized it is, the less importance it attributes to the material things. You often evoke an errant spirit who has just left the earth and does not remember the names of the people it loved or the details that seem important to you. That is because it is no longer concerned with them and they have fallen into forgetfulness. That, what it remembers very well, however, are the main events that have aided in its progress. 308. Does the spirit remember all the lives that preceded the one it just left behind? Its entire past unfolds before it like the legs of the journey. However, as we have already stated, it does not recall all its actions with absolute precision, and it remembers them only according to the influence they have on its present state. As for its earliest existence, those that may be regarded as the spirit's infancy, They are lost in the void and disappear into the night of forgottenness. 309. How does the spirit regard the body it has just left behind? As an ill-fitting garment that has inconvenienced it, and which it feels happy to have forgotten. What sentiment does it experience at the sight of its body decomposing? Almost always indifference. It is a thing that it no longer cares about. 310. Which, by the way, is another reason why I don't understand like funerals and like people being buried. Like I never understood that. And I'm a Puerto Rican Catholic, so we did like the big extravagant funerals, like the fancy casket and the open viewing, and everyone takes pictures of the body, and it's like this whole like thing. And I remember being a little kid going, "What is the point of this? Like, what is the point of this? They're gonna go in the ground, they're gonna decompose, and all that's gonna be left is this pretty box in the ground." Like that is so dumb to me. So I don't know, just reading that little piece, I just found to be so funny. Like the spirits don't give a fuck. So I think that's funny. 310. After a certain amount of time has elapsed, does the spirit recognize its bones and other things that had belonged to it? Sometimes, depending on more or less evolved way in which it regards its terrestrial things. 311. Does the respect we have for the material things that a spirit has left behind attract its attention to them, or does it regard such respect with pleasure? A spirit is always happy at being remembered. The things we save that once belonged to it awaken its memories, but it is the thought that attracts it to you and not the objects themselves. 312. Do spirits hold on to the memory of the sufferings they bore during their last corporal existence? They frequently do, and the memory enables them to better appreciate the happiness they now enjoy as spirits. 313. Do humans who were happy on Earth miss the pleasures they left behind? Only low order spirits could miss the pleasures which correspond to the impurities of their nature and which they must expiate through suffering. For more evolved spirits, eternal happiness is 1,000 times more preferable to the fleeting pleasures of the earth. This is exactly like mature individuals who no longer care about the things that delighted them in childhood. 314. Do those who have begun great works intended for a useful purpose, but which they see interrupted by death, lament at having left them unfinished? No, because they understand that others are meant to complete them. On the contrary, they try to influence other human beings to continue them. Their aim on earth was the wellness of humankind, and the aim is the same in the spirit world. 315. Do those who leave their works of art or literature behind retain the love they had for them during their life? Depending on how much they have evolved, they often judge them differently and frequently disapprove of what they most admired. 316. Does the spirit still have an interest in the works that are being done on earth for the progress of the arts and sciences? It depends on how much it has evolved or on the mission it may have to fulfill. What appears magnificent to you is often a small matter indeed to the spirits, who admire it like a scholar admires the work of a student. They examine only that which can demonstrate the elevation and progress of incarnate spirits. 317. After death, do spirits retain their love for their native land? It is always the same principle. For high order spirits, their native land is the universe. On earth, it is the place in which there is the greatest number of people sympathetic to them. The situation of spirits and their way of looking at things are infinitely varied according to the degree of their moral intellectual development. Spirits of the higher orders generally make only brief stopovers on earth, since everything that is done here is so paltry in comparison with the grandeurs of the infinite. The things that humans attribute the most importance to are so childish to them that this world offers them very little attraction unless they have been called to it in order to cooperate in humankind's progress. Spirits of an average order are the ones who are more frequently stay here, and although they regard things from a more elevated point of view than when incarnate. Ordinary spirits are somewhat sedentary, and they comprise the mass of the surrounding population of the invisible world. With little difference, they hold on to the same ideas, tastes, and tendencies that they had in their corporal envelope. They get involved in our meetings, our business, and our entertainments in which they take part, more or less, actively according to their character. Since they can no longer satisfy their passions, they take pleasure in being with those who have handed themselves over to theirs and they excite them in such individuals. Nonetheless, among them there are those who are more serious and who watch and observe in order to acquire knowledge and evolve. 318. Do spirits' ideas change in the spirit life? Very considerably. Their ideas undergo large modifications and they become more dematerialized. They may sometimes hold on to the same ideas for a long time, but little by little the influence of matter diminishes and they see things more clearly. It is then that they seek ways to improve. 319. Since the spirit had already lived the spirit life before its incarnation, why is it so astonished when it re enters the spirit world? That is only the effect of the first moments and the state of confusion following its awakening. Later, it recognizes its state completely as the memory of the past returns and the impressions of terrestrial life fades away. We are now on the subject of the commemoration of the dead, i.e., funerals. 320. Are the spirits sensitive to being remembered by their loved ones on earth? Much more than you may suppose. Being remembered adds to their happiness if they are already happy and consoles them if they are despondent. Does Memorial Day hold a more solemn meaning for spirits? Like, do they prepare to visit those who pray over their remains? Spirits answer the call of thought on the day as on all other days. Is it for them a meeting day or at their grave sites? They assemble in greater numbers on that day. They're talking about Memorial Day because the numbers of persons who call to them is larger. But each one only pays attention to its friends and not the crowd of different people. In what form do they come, and what would they look like if they could make themselves visible? They would look like they did while they were alive. 322. Do forgotten spirits whose graves are not visited by anyone come despite the fact and feel troubled at not seeing any of their friends remembering them? What is the earth to them? They are only linked to it by the heart. If no one loves them any longer, there is nothing that can make such spirits feel connected to the earth. They have the whole universe before them. 323. Does a visit made to its grave provide more satisfaction to a spirit than a prayer made on its behalf in someone's home? A visit to its grave is a way of showing that one is thinking of the absent spirit. It is the exterioration of the thought. I have already told you that it is the prayer that blesses the act of remembering. The place itself is of little importance if the prayer comes from the heart. 324. Do spirits of individuals who are to be honored with statues or monuments attend the inaugurations and watch them with pleasure? Many watch them when they can, but they are less sensitive to the honors paid to them than to the memories. 325. What does the desire come from where certain persons wish to be buried in one place rather than another? Do they return to it with more satisfaction after death? And is the importance given to that physical thing a sign of a spirit's impure nature? Ooh, that's a good question. A spirit's affection for certain places is a sign of moral impurity, What does one piece of earth represent more than another to an evolved spirit? Doesn't it know that its soul will be reunited with its loved ones, even though their bones may be far apart? Should gathering together the moral remains of all the members of a family be considered meaningless? No, it is a pious custom and a witness to the sympathy of loved ones. If such gatherings mean little to spirits, they are nonetheless useful to humans, and their memories are better concentrated. 326. Is a soul that has returned to life as a spirit sensitive to the honors paid to its mortal remains? When a spirit has already reached a certain degree of purification, it has no more earthly vanity and it comprehends the futility of all things. Nevertheless, you should know that there are spirits who, in the first moments of death, take great satisfaction in the honors paid to them. Others become troubled if they see that their envelope is being forgotten, because they still hold on to some of the prejudices of this world. Do spirits ever watch their own burial? They frequently do, but sometimes they do not perceive what is happening if they are still in a state of confusion. Do they feel flattered by a large gathering at their burial? More or less so, according to their sentiments of people gathered there. Does the spirits attend the meetings of its heirs? Almost always. God wills it for the instruction, and as a punishment for guilty ones. It is there that the spirit judges what its heirs' declarations of affections are really worth. All sentiments become patent to the spirit, and the disappointment it feels in seeing the greed of those who divide up the spoils make their true sentiments very clear. However, their time shall also come. Woo! 329. Is the instinctive respect of people for the dead in all times and among all cultures the result of the intuition of a future existence? It is a natural consequence. Without it, such respect would have no meaning. All right, y'all, we're on the next chapter. This chapter is called The Return, The Return to Corporal Life. And in this chapter, we're going to talk about the preludes to the return, the joining of the soul with the body and abortion, the moral and intellectual faculties of humankind, the influence of the organism, the mental impairment and insanity, childhood, earthly sympathies and antipathies, forgetfulness of the past. Let's get to it. Preludes to the return. Do spirits know the time when they will have to reincarnate? They can sense it like a blind man who feels the fire, he is approaching it. They know they must return to the body just as you know you must die someday, but without knowing when it will happen. Is reincarnation therefore a necessity of spirit life, as death is a necessity of corporal life? Yes, it is. Do all spirits concern themselves with their approaching reincarnation? There are those who never give it a thought, who do not even comprehend it. It depends on the degree of their advancement. For some, uncertainty about their future is a punishment. 332. Can spirits hasten or delay the moment of their reincarnation? They may hasten it through strong desire. They may also delay it if they recoil from the upcoming trials, since among spirits there are cowardly and indifferent ones. However, they do not delay it with impunity. They will suffer for it, like those who refuse the medicine that can restore them to health. 333. If a spirit felt quite happy in an average situation among discarnate spirits and had no ambition to evolve, could it prolong its errant state indefinitely? No, not indefinitely. Advancement is a necessity, and spirits must pursue it sooner or later. All must evolve. It is their destiny. 333. Is the union of a soul with a particular body predestined, or is it the choice made at the last moment? The spirit always designated beforehand. In choosing the trial it wishes to undergo, the spirit asks to reincarnate, and God, who sees and knows everything, sees and knows beforehand that a particular soul will unite with a particular body. 335. Does a spirit have the right to choose the body that it will enter, or does it only choose the kind of life that it will serve as its trial? It may also choose its body because the body's imperfections will be the trials that will help it advance if it overcomes the obstacles it encounters thereby. This choice is not always up to the spirit, but it may at least ask for it. At the last moment, can a spirit refuse to enter the body that it has chosen? If it refuses it, it will suffer much more than one that had not undertaken a new trial in the first place. 336. Could it happen that there might be no spirit who is willing to incarnate in a particular unborn child? God will provide for this. When a child is to be born viable, it is always predestined to have a soul. Nothing is created without a design. 337. Can the union of a spirit with a particular body be imposed by God? Such a union may be imposed in the same way as the spirit's other trials, especially when it is not yet able to make a conscious choice about the matter. Moreover, as excipiation, a spirit may be compelled to unite with the body of a particular child who, by its birth and the position it will have in the world, may become a means of punishment for that spirit. 338. If it just so happened that several spirits presented themselves to occupy the same body, how would that decision be made among them? Several spirits could very well request the same body, but in such cases, it is God who decides which one is best suited to fulfill the mission for which the child is destined. But as I have already said, the spirit is designated before the instant in which it is to join the body. 339. In the moment of incarnation, accompanied by a state of confusion similar to the one following discarnation, the confusion is much greater and especially much longer. At death, a spirit escapes slavery. At birth, it enters it. 340. Is the moment of incarnation a solemn moment for the spirit? Like, does it accomplish it as something serious and important? The spirit is like a traveler embarking on a dangerous voyage, not knowing if he will meet death on the waves ahead. Travelers who set out on a voyage are aware that they will be exposed to dangers, but they do not know if they will run aground. The same applies to a spirit. It knows the kind of trials to which it will be submitted, but does not know if it will fail. Just as the death of the body is a kind of rebirth for the spirit, reincarnation is a kind of death, or rather, a kind of exile and confinement. It leaves the spirit world for the corporal world, just as, after having been a human being, it leaves the corporal world for the world of the spirit. A spirit knows that it will reincarnate just as a human being knows that he or she will die. Like humans, however, the spirit only becomes aware of it at the last moment when the appointed time has arrived. And then, in that supreme moment, confusion takes hold of it, similar to someone in the throes of death. This confusion lasts until a new existence is firmly established. Thus, the commencement of reincarnation is a kind of death throes for the spirit. 341. Is a spirit's uncertainty as to the probability of successfully enduring the trials it will experience in life a cause of anxiety before its incarnation? It is a cause of great anxiety because the trials of its existence will either delay or hasten its evolution, depending on whether they are born well or badly. 242. At the moment of its reincarnation, is the spirit accompanied by spirits, friends, who come to assist with its departure from the spirit world, just as they come to meet it when it returns? That depends on the sphere the spirits inhabit. If it belongs to a sphere in which affection resigns, to which affection reigns, spirits who love it accompany it up to the last moment. encouraging it, and quite frequently following it during its lifetime. 343. Are the spirit friends who follow us through life those who we sometimes see in our dreams and who show their affection for us even though we do not recognize them physically? Quite often they are. They come to visit you as you would visit a prisoner in jail. So he's kind of talking about spirit guides here, but in a way, your spiritual family, the ones whom you were connected with in the spirit world, who, again, you're connected by your virtue, by your virtuosity. So the good ones tend to cling together, the bad ones tend to cling together. And so, when you are then reincarnated, if some of those friends or some of those spirits that you have connected with on the other side, may follow you or may be a guide to you in this lifetime. So that's lovely. Now we're on the subject of the joining of the soul with the body and abortion. So again, there are a lot of tough subjects in this book, and we're about to talk about abortion. So I know it's a trigger for a lot of people. So just keep in mind, this book, take it or leave it. Pick the pieces out of it that you would like to live by, and the pieces that don't resonate with you, set them aside. It's totally fine. The beautiful thing about Spiritism and Espiritismo is that it is somewhat of an open practice. And so these doctrines are not word, okay? So, and if you find anything triggering, by all means, take some time and take some space, okay? 344. At what moment does the soul actually join the body? The union begins at conception, but it's only complete at the moment of birth. From the moment of conception, the spirit designated to inhabit a body is connected to it by the fluidic tie, which gets tighter and tighter up to the instant that the child is born. The newborn's cries announce that it has entered the number of the living and the servants of God. 345. Is the union between spirits and body definitive from the moment of conception? Like during the first stage, could the spirit refuse to inhabit the body that has been designated for it? The union is definitive in the sense that no other spirit can replace that one that has been designated for that particular body. However, since the ties that bind it are very tenuous and easy to break, they may actually be severed by the will of the spirit that recoils from the trial it has chosen. In that case, the child does not survive. So these are instances of stillborns and miscarriages. Okay. 346. What happens to a spirit if the body it has chosen dies before birth? It chooses another. What could be the usefulness of such premature deaths? The imperfections of matter are frequently the cause of such deaths. 247. What usefulness can a spirit derive from incarnating into a body that dies a few days after birth? Such a being does not yet have sufficiently developed consciousness of its existence. The importance of this death is almost null. As we have already said, these cases are often meant as a trial for the parents. 348. Does a spirit know beforehand that the body it has chosen will have no chance for surviving? It knows sometimes, but it chooses it for that reason. It does so in order to avoid its upcoming trials. 349. When a particular incarnation fails for a spirit for any reason, is it immediately furnished with another existence? Not always immediately. The spirit requires time to make another choice, unless an immediate reincarnation had been previously decided on. 350. Once definitively united to the body of a child and therefore no longer able to withdraw, does a spirit sometimes regret the choice it has made? Do you mean that if an incarnate spirit, do you mean if as an incarnate spirit it might complain about its life? Or if it would like to have another? Yes. Does it regret the choice it has made? No, because it is aware of having made such a choice. Once incarnate, a spirit cannot regret a choice of which it has no awareness, but it may find the burden to be too heavy, and if it thinks the burden is beyond its strength to endure, it may resort to suicide. 351. If an inter if ugh, in the internal why am I stuttering today? This is weird. In the interval between conception and birth, do spirits enjoy all their faculties? More or less so, depending on the phase of gestation, because even though they are not fully incarnated, they are already attached to the body. At the moment of conception, confusion begins to envelope the spirit, and it is thereby warned that the time has come to start a new existence. This confusion increases until the time of birth. In the meantime, its state is more or less that of an incarnate spirit during sleep. As the moment of birth approaches, its ideas are erased, as well as its memories of the past, which it is no longer conscious of once it returns to life on the earth. But this memory returns little by little when it re-enters the spirit state. 352. As the moment of birth, at the moment of birth, do spirits immediately recover the fullness of their faculties? No. The faculties develop gradually with the organs. Spirits find themselves in a new existence and must learn to use their bodily instruments. Their ideas return little by little, like those of individuals who wake up from sleep to find themselves in a different situation than the one they were in the day before. 353. Since the union of a spirit with its body is not complete and definitely consummated until after death, can the fetus be considered as having a soul? The spirit who must animate it exists outside of it, so to speak. Strictly speaking, the fetus has no soul, since the current incarnation is only in the process of being accomplished. Nevertheless, the fetus is linked to the soul that it will have. Woo! So the fetus has no soul, but it is linked to the soul through the fluids. So the amniotic fluids. Okay. 354. How can intrauterine life be explained? It's like a germinating plant. The fetus lives a corporal animal-like life. As a fetus, human beings already have within themselves a vegetal animal, which they complete at birth with a spiritual life. 355. As medical science has pointed out, there are infants who, even in their mother's womb, have no possibility of surviving. For what purpose does this occur? This is a common occurrence that God permits as a trial, either for the parents of or the spirit appointed to that animate to animate the child. 356. Are there stillborn infants who are not meant for a spirit to incarnate in them in the first place? Yes. There are some who never had a spirit destined for their bodies. Nothing would have been accomplished in them. It is solely for the parents that such a child is delivered. Can a being of such a nature be carried to term? Yes, sometimes, but it does not survive. Then every child that survives necessarily has a spirit incarnated in it. What would it be without a spirit? It would not be a human being. Ooh, that was a very obscure answer, and we're going to get into that much later on. 357. What are the consequences of abortion for a spirit? Its existence is nullified and must be commenced again. 358. Is artificial abortion a crime regardless of the time of conception? A crime is always committed when the law of God is transgressed. The mother or any other person involved always commits a crime upon taking the life of a child before its birth because it prevents a soul from experiencing the trials for which the unborn body was to have been an instrument. 359. In cases where the life of the mother would be endangered by the birth of the child, is it a crime to sacrifice the child in order to save the mother? It is better to sacrifice the being who does not yet exist than the being who already exists. 360. Is it rational to treat the fetus with the same respect as the body of a child who has already survived? You should see the will of God and the divine handiwork in everything, and not treat lightly the things you ought to respect. Why not respect all works of creation, which are sometimes incomplete due to the will of the Creator? This is one of the divine designs that no one is called to judge. Whew, burn. All right, y'all. Let me take a quick bite of my dinner that has been sitting here and getting cold. It's so good. Mm. Mm. Okay. We are now on the subject of the moral and intellectual faculties of humankind. Let's do it. Where do a person's good or bad moral qualities come from? They reflect the qualities of the incarnate spirit. The purer the spirit, the more the person is inclined towards the good. So a moral person in this incarnation of is the incarnation of a good spirit, and a depraved person is that of a bad spirit? Yes. But it would be better to say an imperfect spirit. Otherwise, one might believe in spirits who will always remain bad, those you call demons. 362. What is the character of the individual in whom frivolous and foolish spirits are incarnated? They are thoughtless, cunning, and sometimes malicious beings. 363. Do spirits possess any passions that do not belong to humankind? No. Otherwise, they would have passed them on to you. 364. Is it one and the same spirit who gives an individual his or her moral and intellectual qualities? Certainly, it is one and the same, and such qualities will depend on the degree of the spirit's evolution. Individuals do not have two spirits within them. 365. Why are the most intelligent individuals who display a highly evolved spirit incarnated in them, sometimes and at the same time extremely depraved? It is because the incarnate spirit is not sufficiently purified, and it yields to the influence of other spirits who are even worse. A spirit's progress is an imperceptible ascending forward progression, but this progress is not accomplished simultaneously in all senses. During one period, a spirit may advance in knowledge, and during another, in morality. So you can be a wickedly smart person and still be an absolute dick, or you could be a morally righteous person and be dumb as bricks. The two are not mutually exclusive in the realm of the evolution of spirits. All right, they each go at their own pace, but it's still happening from that one spirit. There's not two spirits, one of morality and one of knowledge, that are in you. Hopefully that makes sense. 366. What about the opinion according to which the various moral and intellectual qualities of humans are the product of many different spirits incarnated in them, each possessing a special aptitude? And now the spirit breaks it down. If you reflect on it, you will realize how absurd that is. A spirit must possess all aptitudes, and in order to progress, it needs a unified will. If a person were a collection of spirits, this unified will would not exist. He or she would possess no individuality, because at death, all those spirits would be like a flock of birds escaping from a cage. People often complain that they do not understand certain things, but it is interesting to notice how they multiply their problems when they have a very simple and natural explanation right there in their own hands. This notion is another example of taking the effect for their cause. It attributes to the human being what the pagans attributed to God. They believed in as many gods as there were phenomena in the universe. However, the sensible person among them saw nothing more in those phenomena than effects having as their own cause a soul, which is God. The physical and moral realms both offer us numerous points of comparison in this respect. Humankind believed in a multiplicity of matter as long as examining it was confined to the appearance of phenomena. Nowadays, we understand that such varied phenomena might very well be no more than modifications of a single elementary matter. The various faculties are manifestations of the same cause, which is the soul's incarnate spirit and not several souls. Like the different sounds of an organ are the result of the same kind of air and not of as many types of air as there are sounds. The theory in question would mean that when a person loses or acquires certain aptitudes or tendencies, it indicates that certain spirits have left the person or that others have arrived, which would make him or her into multiple beings without individuality and consequently without responsibility. This theory, moreover, is contradicted by the numerous examples of manifestations in which spirits prove their personality and their identity. We are now on the subject of the influence of organisms. So, that previous subject, a lot of people would ask me then, okay, well, then what about possession and mounting? Can you say, um, this book completely contradicts this idea of having multiple spirits within a body. So then, therefore, possession and mounting could not be a thing, right? Wrong. Possession and mounting are activities in which the spirit literally is displaced. Your spirit is put somewhere else so that another spirit can come in and use your body in that particular situation. And so that's not to say that you're not there anymore. Your consciousness is still there. It's just resting, but your spirit is gone. It's put in like this special little black room and another spirit has come through. And so it still aligns with this idea that only one spirit can hold a body for any lengthy period of time. And that's why when you see in the movies, these ideas of like exorcisms and stuff, and you see, these kids in the bed and they're speaking in all these different languages and they're saying legion and there's many of us and they're speaking in all these different spirits coming in and out. It can be a load of crap sometimes because it's implying that all of these spirits are in this body at once. Now, that's not to say that that can't happen. All right, there are instances of that, but as you notice, those instances take a huge toll on the body because the physical material body cannot hold that many spirits. It's not meant to do that. And so, if something like that were to occur, the physical body breaks down very, very fast. People who oftentimes have a situation like that where real clergymen from the Vatican have to come and exorcise them, they have a very short window to do so because that person's physical body is not going to last very long with that many spirits in it. And that's a very, very, very rare instance. But I digress. So the influence of the organism. 367. Okay, sorry. Upon joining the body, does the spirit identify itself with matter? Matter is no more than the spirit's envelope, as clothing is the body's envelope. Upon joining the body, a spirit preserves the attributes of its spirit's nature. 368. Does a spirit exercise its faculties with full liberty after its union with the body? The exercise of its faculties depends on the organs serving as their instruments. They are weakened by the density of matter. Okay, then accordingly, would the material envelope be an obstacle to the free manifestation of the spirit's faculties, like an opaque glass is an obstacle to the free emission of light? Yes, exceedingly opaque. One may further compare the action of the body's matter upon a spirit to that of sludging water, which hinders the free movement of the object immersed in it. 369. Is the free exercise of the soul's faculties dependent on the development of the bodily organs? The organs are the instruments for the manifestation of the soul's faculties. This manifestation depends on the degree of the respective organ's development. just as the excellence of a piece of work depends on the excellence of the tool. So I hope you guys are getting, I mean, I'm only a couple of questions in, but I hope you guys are understanding that even though the first couple of chapters that we talk about, the spirit kind of talks about the physical body or the matter of the body as something that just can be tossed away, something the spirit doesn't really care about once it dies, something that is just so just like nonchalantly replaceable, right? But in this chapter, what he's talking about here, what the spirit is saying here is that in order for the spirit's faculties to truly manifest itself here in the physical 3D world, the organs of the body need to be well, they need to be well taken care of, and or you need to be born well. So organs that are sick, bodies that are sick cannot fully express the spirit's faculties, and that in and of itself can be one of the obstacles. But even in a perfect, well, high maintenance body, that's still an obstacle for a spirit because matter in and of itself is just a heavy process for a spirit. So I hope you understand that even though a spirit does look at a body as something replaceable, it also looks at the body as something that needs to be very much taken care of. So this is why people who practice spiritism and espiritismo and people who are very much a part of the world of mysticism very much believe in the maintenance of body, taking spiritual baths, eating the right foods, exercising, getting adequate rest. It isn't just about physical appearance, it's about the maintenance of the organs at which we can allow spirit to then manifest through. And if our organs and our body is not right, the spirit cannot manifest correctly, and we cannot do our job as mystics and as spirits and as mediums. I hope that makes sense. 369. Is the free exercise of the soul's faculties dependent on the development of the bodily organs? The organs are the instruments for the manifestations of the soul's faculties. This manifestation depends on the degree of the respective organ's development, just as the excellence of a piece. Oh, I just read that. I'm so sorry, you guys. 370. Could one infer from the influence of the organs a connection between the development of the cerebral structure and the moral and intellectual faculties? Do not confuse the effect with the cause. The spirit always possesses the faculties that are proper to it. Thus, it is not the organs that give it its faculties, but rather the faculties that stimulate the development of the organs. According to this view, does the diversity of aptitudes among the individuals stem solely from the condition of their spirit? Solely is not the exact term. The qualities of the spirit who may be more advanced or less so are the basis for this diversity. However, we must take into account the influence of matter because it hinders to a greater or lesser degree the exercising of these faculties. When the spirit incarnates, it brings certain predispositions with it. And if we accept the idea that there is a corresponding area in the brain for each one of them, then the development of these areas will be seen as an effect and not a cause. If the faculties had their origins in the organs themselves, humans would be machines without free will and without any responsibility for their actions. We would have to accept the fact that the greatest of geniuses and scientists and poets and artists owe their talents to chance, which has given them a special brain structure. And consequently, without this structure, they would not be geniuses. The least simpleton could have been a Newton, a Virgil, or a Raphael if he had been provided with a certain brain structure. This assumption becomes even more absurd when applied to moral qualities. Thus, according to this theory, if Saint Vincent de Paul had been gifted by nature with a particular brain structure, he might have been a scoundrel, whereas the greatest scoundrel would only lack a certain brain structure in order to be someone like Vincent de Paul. On the other hand, if we accept the idea that such special structures, if they exist, are effects developed by exercising the faculties, like the muscles by moving them, then nothing seems unreasonable. Let us make a trivial comparison, albeit a truthful one. By certain facial traits, you recognize that a person is addicted to alcohol. Do these traits make that person an alcoholic, or is it alcoholism that produces the traits? Therefore, one may safely state that the organs receive the imprint of the faculties. We're now on the subject of mental impairment and insanity. 371. Is there any basis for the opinion that mentally impaired individuals have a soul of a little evolved nature? No. They have a human soul that is frequently more intelligent than you might think, and it suffers from the insufficiency of its means to communicate, as a mute suffers from the inability to speak. So I work in the mental health field. I've been working in the mental health field for about 15, 16 years now. And one of my and I actually specialize in working with spirits who have disabilities and who have mental health issues. Um, and when I first read this book, and I got to this chapter, it was definitely an eye opener for me. Parts of it I agree with, parts of it I don't. Um, but with my experience and what I've seen, I, honestly, I can't even. You know what? I'm just gonna continue reading, and we'll talk about it later. How about that? We'll talk about it later. Okay. 372. What is the aim of providence in creating unfortunate beings like the mentally impaired? The spirits who dwell in such bodies are expiating past wrongs. They suffer from their constraints and from the impossibility of expressing themselves because of undeveloped or defected brains. Then is it inaccurate to say that organs do not exercise any influence on the faculties? Great question. We have never said that organs have no influence at all. Rather, they exercise a very great influence on the manifestation of the faculties, but they themselves do not produce the faculties. That is the difference. A good musician will not make good music with a bad instrument, but that does not mean he or she is not a good musician. It is necessary to distinguish between the normal state and the pathological state. In the normal state, mental ability may overcome material objects. However, there are cases where matter offers so much resistance that the manifestations are hindered or distorted, as is the case with mental impairment and insanity. There are pathological cases, and in such states, the soul is not in possession of its full reasoning ability, which is why human law exempts such persons from responsibility or from responsibility from their actions. 373. What could possibly be the merit in the existence of beings who, like the mentally impaired, can do neither good nor evil and therefore cannot progress? It is an expiation imposed for having abused certain faculties in a formal life. It is a temporary pause. So, the body of a mentally impaired person may confine a spirit who perhaps animated the body of a genius in a preceding existence? Yes. Genius sometimes becomes a curse when it is abused. Moral superiority does not always match intellectual superiority, and the greatest geniuses may have much to expiate. Consequently, they often live a present existence that is inferior when compared to those they have already lived, a cause of great suffering. The impediments, the impediments that these spirits experience when they try to express themselves are for them like chains that fetter the movements of an active person. One could say that the mentally impaired are disabled in brain as others are disabled in their limbs or eyes. 374. In the spirit state, are the mentally impaired conscious of their mental state? Yes, quite often. They understand that the chains hindering their development are trials and expiation. 375. What is the situation of the spirit in the state of insanity? When freed from the body, the spirit receives impressions directly and directly exerts its action upon matter. Once incarnated, however, it finds itself completely different. Finds itself in completely different conditions and in need of acting with the help of special organs. If one part or a group of these organs is altered, the spirit's actions or impressions relative to these organs are interrupted. Defective eyes cause blindness, defective ears cause deafness, etc. Now imagine that the organ presiding over the manifestations of intelligence and will is partially or entirely damaged or modified, and you will easily understand that the use of such an incomplete or distorted organ will result in an affliction that the spirit is fully aware of, but whose course is powerless to deter. Then it is always the body and not the spirit that is dysfunctional? Yeah. But you must not lose sight of the fact that just as a spirit acts upon matter, matter reacts upon the spirit to a certain degree. Hence, a spirit may find itself momentarily controlled by the alteration of its organs through which it manifests and receives various impressions. It may happen that, with time and after the insanity has lasted quite a while, the repetition of the same acts ends up exerting on the spirit an influence from which it will not be freed until its complete separation from every material effect. 376. What is the reason for insanity, sometimes leading to suicide? Loaded question. The spirit suffers from its constraints and from the powerlessness to freely manifest itself. Thus, it seeks a way to break its ties in death. 377. After death, does the spirit of a mentally impaired person continue to feel the derangement of its faculties? It may feel it for quite some time until it is completely disconnected from matter. Like a person who, upon awakening, continues to feel the confusion unto which sleep has immersed him or her. 378. How is it possible for the impairment of the brain to react upon the spirit after death? It is a remembrance. A weight bears down upon a spirit, and since it is not aware of everything that took place during its insanity, it requires some time to be able to understand its current state. That is why the longer insanity lasts during life, the longer the affliction and constraint will last after death. Disconnected from the body, the spirit continues to feel the impression of its bonds for some time thereafter. So that's what I mean. Being someone who works in the mental health field and being someone who actually specializes in working with spirits who are mentally impaired, that's what I come across. These spirits who are still in this state of confusion, who are still reliving their insanity that they had lived in life. It's my job to find a way to communicate with them, to help them get cleared of their confusion so they can cross over into the spirit world so that they can then get recycled again. But in the meantime, they're here in the state of confusion, and it's a very difficult thing to talk about. I have many clients who come to me that say, "Oh, my son or daughter who had autism or who was schizophrenic or who was X, Y, and Z passed away. Are they okay? Are they good?" And 99.9% of the time, the answer is no, because of their state, because of their mental faculties. They were not able to understand the process of death, and their confusion lasts a lot longer than an average person who may be in that state of confusion for only a little while. And so my job is to then assist and help find those individuals and move them over. It's very, very difficult, and it's a very heart-wrenching job. But we do it, we make it work. The spirits always end up better off in the end, and the end result is it's just an amazing situation. All right. We are now on the subject of childhood. We are almost there, you guys. A couple more pages. 379. Is the spirit who animates the body of a child as developed as the spirit of an adult? Maybe more so if it is more evolved. Only its imperfect organs keep it from fully manifesting itself. It must act according to the instrument that it serves. 380. In a very young child, and despite the obstacle that the imperfection of its organs imposes on its ability to freely manifest itself, does the spirit think as a child or as an adult? While a child, it is natural that the as yet underdeveloped organ of intelligence cannot provide it with all the intuition of an adult. Its intelligence is therefore quite limited until age matures its reason. The confusion accompanying incarnation does not cease suddenly at birth, but only dissipates gradually with the development of the organs. So the spirit that's in a child is going to manifest itself as a child. And then as it grows, it gets more um, evolved. An observation supports this response. The dreams of a child do not have the character of the dreams of an adult. Their object is almost always childish, which is an indication of the nature of the spirit's preoccupations. 381. With the death of the child, does the spirit immediately regain its former vigor? It should, since it has been disencumbered from its physical envelope. Nevertheless, it does not regain its former lucidity until the separation is complete. That is, until there is no longer any connection between the spirit and the body at all. 382. Does the incarnate spirit suffer from the constraint imposed by the imperfection of its organs during childhood? No. Childhood is a necessity. It is as natural and corresponds to the designs of providence. It is a time of repose for the spirit. 383. What is the usefulness of a spirit having to go through childhood? A spirit incarnates in order to perfect itself. During childhood, it is more accessible to the impressions it receives and which may assist in its progress. Persons in charge of its education should contribute towards this goal. 384. Why are a child's first expressions those of crying? To incite the mother's interest and ensure the care it needs. Don't you understand that if it only expressed joy while still unable to speak, few would be concerned about its needs? You ought to admire the wisdom of providence in everything. 385. What is the reason for the change that occurs in its character at a certain age, particularly upon leaving adolescence? Is it the spirit that changes? It is because the spirit recaptures its true nature and reveals who it really was prior to its present incarnation. You do not know the secret that children conceal behind their innocence. You do not know what they are, what they have been, or what they will be. Nevertheless, you will cherish them as though they were a part of you. This happens to such a degree that the love of a mother for her child is reputed to be the greatest love that one being may have for one another. Why do even strangers feel sweet affection and display tender benevolence towards a child? Do you know? No. Well, I will explain it to you. Children are beings whom God has sent into a new existence, so that God is not accused of excessive severity. God gives them all the appearance of innocence, even in children of bad nature. Their misdeeds are covered up because they are unaware of the quality of their acts. However, this innocence does not truly reflect their state of advancement in relation to what they previously were. In reality, it is a picture of what they ought to be, and if they are not, the blame falls on them alone. Nevertheless, it is not merely for the children's sake that God gives them such an appearance, it is also, especially for their parents, whose love is necessary in their fragility. Such love would be extraordinarily weakened if the parents were faced with a quarrelsome and bad-tempered character. On the other hand, supposing their children to be good and gentle, parents give all their affection and surround them with the tenderest care. However, when children no longer need the protection and assistance that has been given to them for 15 or 20 years, their true and individual character emerges in all its nakedness. Their character remains good if it was fundamentally good in the first place, but it will always display nuances that were hidden during early childhood. You can see that God's ways are always the best, and one that when one has a pure heart, they are easily explained. In fact, ponder the possibility that the spirit of the child who is born among you may have come from a world on which it had acquired altogether different habits. How would you want this new being to remain in your midst with passions so diverse from yours, inclinations and tastes entirely opposite to yours? How would you want it to incorporate itself into your environment except in the way God wanted it to? That is, after having experienced the seed of childhood. In this phase, are mixed all the thoughts, all the characteristics, and all the varieties of beings generated by that multitude of worlds on which individuals develop. Upon dying, you yourselves will also be in a sort of childhood in the midst of new family members. In your new non terrestrial existence, you will be ignorant of the habits, the customs, and the forms of relationships of the world, and you will have difficulty in managing a language you are not used to speaking, a language more alive than your thought is today. Childhood provides yet another purpose. Spirits only enter corporal life in order to improve and purify themselves. The fragility of the early years renders them flexible and accessible to the counsels of experience to those who should aid their progress. That is the time when one can best reform their character and curb their bad tendencies. Such is the duty that God entrusts to parents, a sacred mission for which they will have to answer. Consequently, childhood is not only useful, necessary, and indispensable, but it is also the natural result of the laws that God has established and which govern the universe. We are now on the subject of earthly sympathies and antipathies. 386. Could two individuals who have already known and loved each other meet in another corporal existence and recognize each other? Recognize each other? No. Feel attracted to each other? Yes. Frequently, intimate connections founded on sincere affections arise from no other cause. Two individuals are drawn together by apparently fortuitous circumstances, but it is actually the result of the attraction of two spirits who have been searching for each other amidst the crowd. Don't they find great pleasure in being able to recognize each other? Not always. The memory of past lives might hold greater disadvantages than you suppose. After death, they will recognize each other and will remember the time they spent together. 387. Is sympathy always the result of their having known each other previously? No. Two spirits who have affinities naturally search for each other without their having been previously acquainted as incarnates. 388. Wouldn't the encounters which sometimes occur between certain persons and which are attributed to chance be the effect of a kind of sympathetic relationship? Among thinking beings, there are connections that you do not yet know anything about. Magnetism is at the core of this science, which you will later comprehend better. 389. Where does the instinctive repulsion come from when certain individuals meet each other for the first time? They are antipathetic spirits who perceive and recognize each other without ever having spoken to each other. 390. Is instinctive antipathy always a sign of bad nature? Two spirits are not necessarily bad just because they are not sympathetic. Antipathy may originate from dissimilarity in their way of thinking. As they evolve, however, these shades of dissimilarity are erased and the antipathy disappears. 391. Does the antipathy between two individuals arise first in the one whose spirit is worse or in the other whose spirit is better? It arises in both, but the causes and effects are different. A bad spirit feels antipathy towards anyone who may be able to judge and unmask it. Upon seeing a person for the first time, it perceives that the person will disapprove of it. Its dislike then changes into hatred and envy, which inspire it with the desire to do bad things. The good spirit, on the other hand, is repulsed by the bad one because it knows the other will not understand it and that neither shares the same sentiments. However, aware of its higher moral principles, it feels neither hatred nor jealousy towards the other. It is content to simply avoid and pity it. We're now on the subject of forgetfulness of the past. 392. Why does the incarnate spirit lose the memory of its past? Human beings cannot and must not know everything. God, out of divine wisdom, wills it to be this way. Without the veil that hides certain things from them, they would be dazzled, like one who passes suddenly from darkness into light. By forgetting their past, they are more fully themselves in the present. 393. How can individuals be responsible for their deeds and redeem their wrongs if they cannot remember them? How can they profit from the experience acquired in lives that have fallen into forgetfulness? We could understand that life's tribulations might be a lesson for them if they could remember what had caused them in the first place. But since they do not remember them at all, each existence is as if it were a first. And it is thus that they are always having to start over. How can this be reconciled with the justice of God? It's a great question. With each new existence, spirits gain more intelligence and can better distinguish between good and evil. Where would their merit be if they remembered their entire past? When spirits enter their life of origin, the spirit life, their entire previous life unfolds before them. They see the wrongs they committed, which are the cause of their suffering, as well as what would have kept them from committing them in the first place. They understand the justice of the position assigned to them, and they thus desire a new existence that can redeem the one that has elapsed. They seek trials similar to those they have already experienced or struggles they believe will appropriate their advancement. They ask spirits who are of higher order to help them in the new task that they are about to undertake. For they know that the spirits who will be given to them as their guides in that new existence will endeavor to enable them to repair their wrongs of the past by giving them a sort of intuition about them. This same intuition is the thought, the wrongful desire, which frequently assaults you and which you instinctively resist, most of the time attributing your resistance to the principles you have received from your parents. However, it is the voice of consequence speaking to you, and the voice is a memory of the past, a voice that warns you not to fall into the errors you committed previously. In that new existence, if a spirit endures its trials with courage and resists them, it evolves and will ascend in the spirit's hierarchy when it returns to be among them. If during our corporal life we do not have a precise memory of what we were and would have of what good and bad things we did in our previous lifetimes, we nevertheless have intuition of them. Hence, our instinctive tendencies are reminiscences of our past, about which our conscious, which represents the desire we have conceived to no longer commit the same wrongs, warns us that we must resist. 394. On a world more advanced than ours, where beings are not subject to all our physical needs and infirmities, do they understand that they are happier than we are? Happiness is generally relative. We feel it by comparing it with a less happy state. In some of those worlds, though better than ours, have not yet reached the state of perfection, and their inhabitants must have their own annoyances. Even though the wealthy among us do not suffer the anxieties of material needs like the poor, they are no less subject to the same types of tribulations that embitter their lives. Thus, I would ask whether the inhabitants of those worlds, in their own situations, feel as unhappy as we do, and whether they also complain about their fate, since they do not have memory of a less evolved existence for comparison. Two different answers apply to this question. There are worlds among those you are speaking about on which the inhabitants have a clear and exact memory of their past lives. You should understand that these can and do know how to appreciate the happiness that God permits them to enjoy. However, there are other worlds whose inhabitants situated, as you say, in better conditions than yours, are no less subject to great annoyances, and even misfortunes. They do not appreciate their happiness because they do not remember an even happier, an even unhappier state. Nevertheless, if they do not appreciate it as incarnations, they will as spirits. In the forgetfulness of past existences, especially when they are painful, is there not something providential where the divine wisdom is revealed? Is one more highly evolved worlds when the memory of unhappy lives is nothing more than a bad dream, that the memory of such lives resurfaces? One less evolved world, however, would present misfortunes not be increased by the memory of everything that had been endured in the past. Therefore, we conclude that everything that God has made is well made, and that it is not our place to criticize the divine works and say how God ought to have regulated the universe. The remembrance of our former personalities would entail serious inconveniences. In certain cases, it could cause us a great deal of humiliation, and in others, it could exalt our pride and hinder our free will. God has given us just what is necessary and sufficient for us to improve ourselves. The voice of conscience and our instinctive tendencies keeping us from what could harm us. We would further add that if we had the remembrance of our former personal acts, we would also be able to remember those of other people, and such knowledge could have the most unpleasant effects on our social relationships. Since we do not always have good reason for being proud of our past, it is almost always a blessing for a veil to have been thrown over it. This concurs perfectly with the doctrine of the spirits regarding worlds that are more evolved than ours. On those worlds where nothing resigns except the good, there is nothing painful about remembering the past. That is why previous lifetimes are frequently remembered as easily as we remember what we did yesterday. As for the sojourn, that one may have had less evolved worlds, the memory of it is nothing more than a bad dream, as we have stated. 395. Can we obtain any revelations about our former lives? Not always. Nevertheless, many who know who they are and what they did, if they were permitted to speak openly, they would make curious revelations about the past. 396. Some persons believe that they have vague memories of an unknown past. It appears as a fleeting image of a dream, which in vain they try to retain. Wouldn't this belief simply be an illusion? So we're talking about people who believe in past lives and people who do like past life readings and people who think of themselves as like Cleopatra, this and that, right? The spirit says, it is sometimes real, but much more often it is an illusion to be guarded against. It could simply be the effect of an overexcited imagination. Damn. So sorry to all of you past life readers and all you guys who think about past lives. Oh man, ouch. 397. In corporal existences of a more evolved nature than ours, is the memory of a previous life more precise? Yes. As the body becomes less material, they become easier to remember. The memory of the past is clearer for those who inhabit worlds of a higher order. 398. Since people's instinctive tendencies are reminiscents of their past, then by studying those tendencies, can they know about the wrongs they have committed? Undoubtedly. To a certain point, however, it is necessary to take into account the improvement that may have taken place in the spirit and the resolutions it made in its errant state. Its present existence could in fact be much better than the preceding one. Could it be worse? In other words, could persons commit wrongs in their present existence which they had not committed in preceding ones? That depends on their advancement. If they do not yet know how to resist trials, they could be drawn to commit new wrongs as a consequence of their position they themselves have chosen. But such wrongs indicate a stationary state rather than a regressive one, because spirits may advance or remain stationary, but they do not regress. Hopefully, you got that. So, as stated in previous chapters, spirits who make mistakes in their incarnate life, that's okay. And not that it's okay, but it's all that indicates is that that spirit will remain stagnant. It's not indicating that a spirit will go backwards. You know, the whole purpose of spiritual life is constant evolution. 399. Since the tribulations of corporal life are at the same time expiations for past wrongs and trials for the future, does it follow that from the nature of these tribulations we may deduce the kind of preceding existence we lived? Very frequently, because individuals are punished for their particular sins. Nevertheless, we cannot make this an absolute rule. The instinctive tendencies are a more certain indication because the trials that a spirit undergoes refer as much to the future as to the past. When the end of that providence has marked for their errant life has arrived, spirits choose for themselves the trials to which they desire to submit themselves, and which will hasten their advancement. That is, the kind of existence they believe most appropriate for furnishing them with the means to evolve, and such trials are always related to the wrongs they must expiate. If they triumph over them, they advance. If they succumb, they have to start over. Spirits always enjoy their free will. It is in virtue of this freedom that in the spirit state they choose the trials of their upcoming corporal life, and in the incarnate state they deliberate over what they will or will not do, choosing between good and evil. Denying humans their free will would reduce them to the condition of a machine. Integrated into corporal life, spirits momentarily lose the remembrance of their former lives, and as though a veil hid them. Nevertheless, they sometimes have a vague awareness of them, and they may even be revealed under certain circumstances. However, this does not happen except by the will of the high order spirits, who may allow it to occur spontaneously for some useful purpose, but never to satisfy vain curiosity. Of course, future existences cannot be revealed in any case, since they depend both on the manner in which the present existence is completed and the later choice of the spirit. Forgetfulness of wrongs that were committed is not an obstacle to spirits. Improvement because even though they do not have a precise memory of them, the knowledge that they had of them during the errant state, in addition to the desire they conceived at the time to repair them, guide them through their intuition and inspire them with the thought of resisting wrongdoings. This thought is the voice of conscience and is seconded by the spirits who will assist them if they heed their good suggestions. Even though people do not know the acts they committed in their previous lives, they can nonetheless always know the kind of wrongs for which they become guilty and what their dominant characters are. They only have to study themselves in the present, and they will be able to discern what they were in the past, not by what they are per se, but by their tendencies. The tribulations of corporal life are at the same time expiations for past wrongdoings and trials for the future. They purify and elevate us if we endure them with resignation and without complaint. The nature of the trials and tribulations we undergo may also enlighten us about what we were and what we did, as in this world we judge the acts of a criminal by the punishment the law inflicts on him or her. Thus, those who are proud will be punished by the humiliation of the subaltern position, the self-indulgent and the greedy by poverty. Those who were harsh towards other by the harsh treatment they themselves will suffer, the tyrant by the slavery, the bad son by the ingratuitous of his own children, the lazy by the forced labor, and etc. All right, guys, that is it for tonight. Next, we will do chapters 16 through 18, and we will start off with the emancipation of the soul. Super excited, and we will just get through it. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If you have not already shared my page, subscribed to my page, liked my stuff, please do so now. That would be greatly appreciated. Now, before I let you guys go, though, I'm going to go through some of the comments and answer some of your questions. So let's see what we got here up in TikTok, and then I'll go to the Facebook stuff and the YouTube stuff. And now's the time to ask all of your questions. So let's see here. All right. Yes, exactly. Okay, so these aren't really questions. Are schizophrenics hearing spirits? Oh, you mean people who are schizophrenic, like that are alive? Do they hear spirits? So I am going to be really blunt with this answer, and it's only because I work in the field of mental health. it's only because I have friends and family who actually suffer from paranoid schizophrenia and who are on medication for it. I absolutely loathe any practitioner who says that someone with schizophrenia does not have schizophrenia and that they are just hearing spirits and that they need to learn how to hone their gift. You are a piece of shit and you need to be removed from this planet. That is the worst thing that you can say to someone with schizophrenia and someone who goes through auditory and visual hallucinations. That is the worst thing you can say. Now, and there's a million reasons for that, okay? However, I'm not going to go on to the extreme and say that people who suffer from certain mental health issues don't also have abilities. That there is that as well too. So the short answer is no. The long answer is maybe with all of that involved. All right. So let's go to some Facebook and some YouTube questions and see what we got here. I don't know why things keep showing up on my screen. It's weird. Oh, thank you. My blue robe. So this is my bathrobe and I love it. It keeps me cozy. And I love wearing hats. But also because it's winter time and we're about to expect a snowstorm on Tuesday, so it's just getting colder and colder. Let's see. So my deceased husband told my son that I will not be able to come too often. Reference to your reading on page 217. Also, if the spirit is reincarnated, will we see them when it is our turn to go to the spirit world? Great question. So according to this doctrine, and I'm gonna speak in two different ways. According to this doctrine, the answer is maybe. So it depends on the state of evolution of the spirits. So your husband, your son, and you might all be on different states of spiritual evolution. And so when it's time to cross over, you're going to meet spirits of that same frequency, of that same state of evolution. You're not going to see spirits of lower vibrations and you're not going to see spirits of higher vibrations. And if your husband happened to be someone who's of a higher evolutionary state, you might not see him. And if your son was of lower, you might not see him when you go. However, according to a lot of science and a lot of research on near-death experiences, on people who have quote unquote astral travel to the spirit world, on people like myself who are spiritists, espiritistas, death witches, and people who spend our whole life crossing others over, there is a lot of evidence and there's a lot of people who do claim that their family is there on the other side waiting for them. Now, this could be a fact, this could be true for them, or it could be their spirit guides posing as their family in order to help with the transition of bringing you over, because you're seeing familiar faces. I cannot speak on either because I am not dead. I died once when I was about 4 for about 6 minutes, and then I came back, and during that time, there wasn't much happening. I can explain my experience with that, but I didn't see people per se that I knew and that I recognized. So for me, it was different, but for everyone, it's different. So I really can't answer that. Like it's one of those things, you know what I mean? Like no one's ever been able to go there and come back and tell us the truth, right? um, Okay, so thank you so much for your questions, for your comments. And let's aim, you know what? I really apologize because I've been giving you guys dates of when I want to come back on and read, but then life keeps throwing me curveballs and I can't seem to get on when I say that I'm going to get on. So I've been saying Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday, but I've noticed I can only really get on Sundays. So for now, let's aim for Sundays at 7 p.m. because that seems to be the only date that I'm very consistent with. Wednesdays and Fridays, I'm going to try my best to get on if I can, and I'll definitely give you guys some notice ahead of time if that's the case. But Sunday, definitely for sure, for sure. Okay. So thank you guys again, and let's keep going. This is how we grow. Love you guys so much. Take it easy. Blessed night.